Welcome, everybody. And I think I did see, there's Representative Ferrary. Well, welcome everybody to this evening and morning where Brian is in Taipei joining in. Welcome everybody to our evening conversation about, or conversation about hunger initiatives in the 2024 New Mexico legislative session. What are some of those takeaways, some of the things that happened, some of the opportunities that lay ahead of us, and then maybe where are some of those things that we're going to be working on to strengthen our initiatives that are really focused on securing food security and creating a healthier and more healthful options for our communities, individuals, and families in New Mexico, along with food security that really comes with hopefully health and well-being. Right. So welcome this evening. My name is Pam Roy, and I really want to thank the Interfaith Hunger Coalition and Carlos Navarro for the invitation to participate this evening and help to moderate this conversation. We're going to talk about the recent outcomes of the New Mexico legislative session. And in that, I will say, these are all things that many of us have been working on for a very long time. So I want to thank each and every one of you for your wisdom that you bring to this work, for the voices in your communities that you share, and so that we all learn together about what our needs are, and then also what the opportunities are to care for ourselves and our state and our communities. So with that, I'm really excited. We have a wonderful panel and my dear friends and people I have just the most amazing respect for who will share out some of the things that we are hoping will benefit the world that we live in. New Mexico is a state where we have a high average when it comes to hunger and poverty, and that is really from being a state that is a high poverty state. And yet we are working towards as many solutions as we can to end hunger in the state. So I want to thank everybody for that long view. Also really want to thank Representative Joanne Ferrary, who's here. She's going to help us in the front end of this conversation, talk a little bit about what it means as a legislator and also as a person who started the Legislative Hunger Caucus a few years ago to really highlight the issues that we face in our state and then also some of the opportunities and solutions. So with that, just really briefly, I'm going to kind of do a little front end work, and then what I'll do is pass it off to Representative Ferrary to deepen the conversation around what does it mean to have a budget like House Bill 2 and 3. We call it House Bill 2 and 3. And this is the state budget. The state, our legislators like Representative Ferrary and all work on the budget year round. And then we also have what I call more the administrative branch, which is the Legislative Finance Committee. So staff who focus on what are all the issues that face our state, how do we see the income of our state? Of course, approximately, I think it's, and Representative Ferrari might be able to help me with this one, approximately 43% or so of our state budget is predicated on oil and gas industry tax revenues, and that's a part of the whole, right? And what does it fund? Things like education and some of the big issues that were governor driven this year around homelessness and housing. And many other things that are going to really benefit us. But, you know, education, the health system in our state, rural, I heard rural a lot. How are we supporting our rural communities, and how are these programs and people, right, being supported in communities that are providing medical services? And we talked a lot about infrastructure and transportation initiatives, things that bolster the underpinnings of our community. The capital outlay, huge issue this year in the sense of what kinds of things do our communities that the municipalities, tribal communities need to kind of create, infrastructure, the things that we need that are going to help us with our programs. So anyway, with that, House Bill 2 and 3, the state budget. So big, I want to say, was it 10.8 $2 to $3 billion. State budget up 6.8 or 6.7 to 8% from last year. So big push for investment in the state. We also know that it ebbs and flows because of oil and gas in particular, oil and gas production in our state. So what some of the bigger context around that budget that our legislators focused on were really creating and maintaining and enhancing things like permanent funds or things like the legacy fund. How do we create a pool of resources or early childhood fund? How do we create a pools of resources that are large enough that we're working off of the interest in those pools of resources versus spending money annually, which we do anyway, but the idea of holding these larger pools of funds over time so that we really have a more stable budget across some of the programs. So what I might do is stop there and ask Representative Ferrary if she wants to add something to that. And then what we thought we would do is focus in on some of the food initiatives and hunger initiatives that were in the governor's budget priorities. And I've got a little table to share just momentarily to sort of focus this in, and then maybe pitch it back to Representative Ferrari and then to our colleagues to talk more about those programs. Representative Ferrari, anything else you'd like to share sort of on the front end of like how this budget works and, from a legislative perspective?
Sure. Thank you and welcome everyone. We're in our RV and getting a vacation quick before we start our interim work. So I'm just glad to be here and welcome everyone for this great discussion about, the bills and the funding that went through or didn't. And but no, I think it is a machination of getting through not only committees, but then also the funding committees and getting all of the support throughout. So it is quite a process. And when they say making the sausage, they're really talking about how this all comes together. So thank you for presenting, what we did in House Bill 2 and 3. So thanks.
Thanks, Representative Ferrari. We'll pass it back to you in a moment as well. So with that, as Representative Ferrari said, so the House Bill 2, the budget is a year-round process. So even though the legislature just finalized the legislative session, the governor just assigned House Bill 2 and 3, and we now have a budget that will start July 1st. So this budget is from July 1st of 2024 to June 30th of 2025. Interim committees, as Representative Ferrari said, will soon start up. So they're organizing, putting their work plans together. This is a good time to weigh in on those work plans with some of the committees to either provide presentations or just suggestions and things like that. So that's one piece. Those will start up really kind of June and then go all the way through until the legislative session. And as Representative Ferrari said, we also have the Legislative Finance Committee that will be meeting. They meet year round. And so they'll start really looking at things right now. The other thing is to think about, we want to continue to evolve and make sure that we keep our agency partnerships strong. The agencies are the ones that then have to really roll out these programs, build on the programs, provide the funding out that goes into they administer those funds. And they're important partners in our work as well, right? So, and so part of our advocacy is towards asking those agencies, do they have funding for hunger programs in their base budgets? Are those budgets, when they actually turn in their budgets at the end of August, do those budgets reflect some of the things and the requests that we have? So I'll stop there in that part of it. Just bring up really quickly, share, focus in, and then definitely going to pass the baton to my colleagues. This screen just is just an example the governor's office. So the governor sees hunger initiatives as a huge priority and put together a very large budget around some of our initiatives that we care deeply about, and also to see them as working together in concert together and across multiple agencies: Aging and Long-Term Services, Department of Health, and Service Department, Public Education Department, that now has a Healthy Universal School Meals Program, which was enacted last year, and we're building out on that. That was a $41 million increased request this year from last year. The initial request last year was $22 million that was put into the budget, and there was some shoring up funding. So think about that. Healthy Universal School Meals means that every child in New Mexico can actually have lunch at any school, charter school, BIE school, and as long as those schools are participating in the federal meal program. So all students, that also includes breakfast and dinner. So it's a big push for us, and the education department is also bolstering that with a lot of trainings for food service and also implements for food service. So infrastructure things in their kitchens. So just an example. Another big push for the governor this year was to increase SNAP, and some of our colleagues might talk more about that. SNAP for seniors and those who are disabled. So that was a big push and a win. Places though where we didn't see as many things receive the kind of attention that we were hoping for were things like the New Mexico Grown program for early child care and senior centers, and the idea of being able to expand the opportunities for senior centers and early daycare centers to be able to buy fresh fruits and vegetables and now locally raised meats, and really add those into their meal plans. The funding just didn't come through in the House Bill 2 budget. So they're pulling those resources, several $1 million from other budgets like the Kiki Saavedra Fund and the Early Childhood Education Fund as well. And the agencies are saying that's not the approach that they would like to take. So just think about kind of those things as well. In New Mexico Grown in the Healthy School Meals Program, though, has $1.7 million, but that's down from 2.3 last year, $2.3 million last year. And yet these programs are expanding. So how do we keep up with the growth and importance of the programs? So I'm just going to stop there. And then one other that I'll share, Double Up Food Bucks, which is SNAP programs where people who are on SNAP can go to their local farmers markets. $633,000 into the Department of Agriculture's budget to bolster that program. And that leverages federal funding. So we can't forget that a lot of these programs, the importance of these programs, leverage funding at the federal level as well. And the example of that one is over a period of 4 years between the state and federal funding, $8.8 million will go directly, or more than $8 million will go directly into those who participate in the SNAP program, who want to purchase at their local farmers markets and participating stores and roadside stands. And every one of those dimes then goes right back into our local agricultural economy and into our communities. So that's a win-win. Right. So I am going to stop there. My cat just decided to help us out with the agenda and landed right on top of it. His name's Hercules. So Hercules has joined us now. And I'd like to pass it off to Representative Ferrary to build on some of the things I just shared. And then we're going to then move to Sherry Hooper. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Pam. Yes, all of those great programs and things we need to expand have been developed and worked on for years, and we need to keep those going. And we can't let people go hungry in our state, not one meal. And we need to make sure when we have billions of dollars in reserve to make sure that we can expand programs that are already in place and add the ones that maybe we haven't been able to get through yet, and to help that distribution and help people be able to fulfill those meals for their kids, their elders, their families. And this is just something that every year we need to build on till everyone isn't going hungry for any meal. And we should be expecting that right now. And so I'm a little disappointed that there were some things that didn't get through or get funded fully. There's no reason for any of our agencies to have to backfill and not have what funding they need to do a good job. And that's what it takes. I know we're short-staffed in a lot of different areas in our state, but when we have so many nonprofits and other organizations that are willing and able to do the job and to support the distribution and also getting people fed, we need to take advantage of that, and then also build our state agencies. During the interim committees, I'd like to just suggest for us to be able to, as a coalition, as nonprofits, as all of our interested and hardworking groups, for us to be and encourage other people to be at every single one of our interim committees, whether it's directly affected or not. People at every meeting need to hear from us in public comment. And, you know, we don't have to do it angrily. We can say just the urgency, and this is not something that can be put off any longer. And for people, and we have through our legislative hunger coalition, or caucus, I should say, the support, but we need to remind people, especially when there's new people coming in all the time, and this is an election year, we need to be at every single town hall that's held. Every time someone holds a fundraiser, go and ask those candidates, even if they're running against an incumbent, make sure they're going to be on board early on, because right after election, there's not much time, and we go right into the 60-day session. So for them to hear, and if we have talking points, which I know Pam has a lot of, and we can have those ready for people to take with them, and to emphasize where we've had the shortfalls, where we need to, increase the funding, because it's an election year. The people are going to be listening. They need your vote. And so if we can expand our groups and get other people there to, mention this also, I think it's going to be really important. And also, I'd like to mention how the Food and Ag Policy Council is going to be having a special meeting March 28th. And Pam, you're going to have to fill us in on the time and how it's being organized. So with that, I just really appreciate everyone being so concerned, and all these years, because that's what it takes, and that's what we need to build on. So thank you all.
Thank you, Representative Ferrary, so much, and hope you can stay with us for a bit to also maybe share out when we have some questions and answers. So many thanks for setting the stage. We have a lot of work to do, and doing that kind of outreach and advocacy and working together on a united voice will be really helpful. And yes, we are going to have the New Mexico Food and Ag Policy Council. I want to thank some of my board members and members here tonight on the 28th of March. I will put that information in the chat. We will have probably 8 agencies presenting, and our Secretary of Agriculture will put together kind of the landscape in the front end of it, and provide some statistics as well that we need to think about when we're talking about hunger and food security in the state. And so I will share that out with everybody and put that in the chat, the RSVP. And I'm going to hand it off to Sherry Hooper, and Sherry and your colleagues who are here, Kurt as well, talking about some of the food initiatives and the things that you worked on during the session and how it played out.
Thank you, Pam. And I'm honored to go after Representative Ferrary. She is such an advocate for people who are food insecure in the state. Thank you so much, Representative Ferrary, for all you do. And I think that was great advice for the food banks. Thank you. So I have prepared some remarks, and I'm going to concentrate specifically on the request that the food banks made of our legislators this last legislative session and what we were able to get, and again, what we learned. So New Mexicans who seek emergency food support come from a wide array of backgrounds and situations. They can be working families with young children, seniors, people with disabilities, veterans, unhoused individuals, and many more. What unites them is a lack of income and the need for food to support themselves and their families. 17 of New Mexico's 33 counties, 17, have elevated food insecurity rates beyond New Mexico's average rate of 13.5%. And both Luna County and McKinley County have rates above 20%. 1 in 7 New Mexicans faces hunger. 1 in 5 New Mexico's children experiences hunger, and 1 in 8 seniors suffer from hunger. The increased number of New Mexicans seeking food assistance during the pandemic has not decreased since the health crisis ended. The state's charitable nonprofit network of 5 food banks, known collectively as the New Mexico Association of Food Banks, ensures emergency food is available in all 33 counties and every corner of the state. These 5 food banks, Community Pantry in Gallup, Echo Food Bank in Farmington, the Food Bank of Eastern New Mexico in Clovis, the Food Depot in Santa Fe, and Road River Food Bank in Albuquerque, work in close collaboration and partnership with 500 nonprofit food programs. The state's charitable nonprofit network of 5 food banks and 500 nonprofit programs labor day in and day out to meet the otherwise unmet food needs of New Mexicans. This network is facing a perfect storm, which is threatening the network's ability to fill this food gap. In 2023, New Mexico's 5 food banks distributed more than 54 million pounds of food, which provided over 45 million meals to New Mexicans who are food insecure. This is an average of about 3.8 million meals each month. With approximately 250 retail grocery stores, but 500 food bank network food distributions in New Mexico, the food banks are the only source of food in many communities across the state. Struggling New Mexicans need an additional $169 million annually just to meet their food needs. Contributions by food donors have diminished as producers and retailers improve efficiencies and have less waste. The USDA's TFAP, or the Emergency Food Assistance Program, has decreased the food it provides by half since 2020, leading the food banks to replace more than 10 million pounds of food. After a wave of generosity during the pandemic, cash contributions have declined while food banks are finding it necessary to spend more to purchase food. Prices of food. The network purchases important staples, fresh produce, protein, all of those things that make for nutritious diets. Those contributed amounts are insufficient. And so the food banks are having to purchase a great deal of the food we distribute. As New Mexico food banks have experienced this perfect storm, New Mexicans who are food insecure have certainly experienced their own version of a perfect storm. Between trying to recover from the economic effects of the pandemic, the substantial decrease in SNAP benefits that occurred starting March 2023, and steep inflation rates, especially for food, many are hanging on by a thread. The food banks and their 500 partners are working tirelessly to ensure people have access to what they need. With the increase in food costs, the decrease of TFAP, USDA foods from pandemic levels, and the drop-off of donated food from food rescue, this is actually happening across the country, not just in New Mexico. We find ourselves in a challenging position. People need help today. New Mexico has historically been in the top 5 hungriest states for seniors and children for many years. Though efforts are being made to address these needs and change outcomes for the future, Solutions to problems this large often take time to come to fruition. The reality is that New Mexicans are hungry today. We need to focus on solutions for tomorrow while continuing to keep food access available today for some of our state's most vulnerable populations. The association requested that the state legislature appropriate $25 million for food banks to acquire enough shelf-stable food to fully meet the annual meal gap in our state. The food banks also requested that this funding be recurring. Recurring funding allows the food banks to make plans and order product in a timely manner, ensuring that there is no delay in supply to any county or community in our state. Recurring funding also provides a consistent source of funding, while federal nutrition programs are frequently threatened at budget time and private funding is challenging to predict. While we did not receive the requested $25 million in funds, the food banks will receive $5 million, which is a repeat of our fiscal year 24 allocation. These funds are specifically for food purchase and delivery costs. We have much work to do to educate our elected officials about the severity of hunger in New Mexico, the fact that hunger is a symptom of poverty, and that hunger has lasting impacts on people who are food insecure. We thank Governor Lujan Grisham for her awareness of the crisis of hunger in our state and her willingness to consistently include food bank funding in her food initiative. We also thank our state legislators for their dedication to helping New Mexicans who are food insecure. The food banks will continue to educate our local, state, and federal elected officials on the hunger crisis in New Mexico, and always to offer our assistance as they advocate for people in need. Thank you.
Sherry, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I just really want to say, add to what Sherry said, to thank her and her team, the work and board members. I see Scott Bunton with us today from the Food Depot, board member, chair, I believe still, and really appreciate your leadership. One of the things that Sherry has taught me, and I've and we've all witnessed, is when food banks really look at food in a sense of differently. So I want to give a huge shout out to the Food Depot and a partnership that they took on with the Department of Agriculture for what's called the Regional Food Purchasing Assistance Program. It came out of the Inflation Reduction Act, and we are hoping it might be a new program in the Farm Bill, but it is really helping people get New Mexico grown and raised foods. But Sherry and her team had to set up a whole new system, a whole new infrastructure to really build out that program in New Mexico. And I want to thank you so much. I know one of the things that Sherry's always says, we want people to have the healthiest and most and freshest foods as we possibly can. And you all are certainly making it happen, and really want to thank you for that. So.
Thank you, Pam. And I do want to point out Jason Riggs, who's with the Roadrunner Food Bank, and Alice Perez, who's with the Community Pantry in Gallup. And if I'm missing other food bankers, I apologize. I try to look through the group. And of course, Scott Bunton, who is on the board of directors at the Food Depot and leads our advocacy committee. He was so helpful this last legislative session in advising us. The food banks were somewhat new to this work, and we're delighted to be a part of it, and we learn more and more every session. So thank you, Representative Ferrary, and to others who have really helped to provide some advice and guidance to us. We're program folks. So we're delighted to be a part of the policy family, I guess, and look forward to doing our part to move forward with a lot of the food initiatives that are being proposed. Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry. Well, you all do an incredible job of advocacy and unified and coordinated advocacy all year round. So I really appreciate it. And also to our colleagues, as you mentioned, Jason from Roadrunner, really appreciate you all being here with us as well, and the work that you all are doing. I know it's very much a partnership and coordinated effort across the state. So with that, I would love to pass this on to Kurt Rager, who is with us this evening or today, depending on where you are, with Lutheran Advocacy Ministry in New Mexico, and some of the work that you all are working on, Kurt, the things that you've been advocating for. I look forward to hearing more.
Well, I thought I was going lower in the lineup.
Well, you can if you want to.
I would wait. Well, I'll make a couple of comments and then you could go back to me. I was waiting for Emily and some of the other stars to speak. But I've got to say a couple of things that just based on what Sherry said. Number one, I don't think we could have had two better voices at the legislature this year speaking on the issues of hunger in the state than Sherry and oh my goodness. Jason, you're she goes
Katie,
to my church. I can't think of her name.
Katie Anderson. How's
Katie.
that? I'll help you out.
Yes, Katie, I'm so sorry. We couldn't have had two better voices up there in front of legislators than you two. So I want to thank you for that. And Sherry, you are going to be missed tremendously. I don't know what I don't even have words to express my sadness at your retirement, although I know it's well earned and certainly something it's good to do. But I guess the other thing that really strikes me, you mentioned that it's of course a symptom of poverty, and one of many symptoms of poverty in this state. And what just baffles me is that this state, of course, we know that the hunger issue. That the legislators we certainly can claim that it's not a partisan issue. And yet, why does it occur every year where it's like pulling teeth to get money out of the legislature to deal with hunger in this state? And why is it that a bill goes over to the Senate and doesn't have any funding for things like the food banks? I mean, to me, that is just, I want to beat my head against the wall. I mean, they claim that it's important, and I think when you talk to them individually, they all agree that it's a need, and yet something in our system is broken in that is not a unified conversation that legislators are having, and that's protected and that's advanced each year. 25 million should be a no-brainer, and it should be reoccurring, and yet we have legislators in that system that tinker with it, and it all goes by the wayside. That just baffles me. And so that's something that I would really hope that we all can begin to uncover how that happens and work with legislators so that it is more. I mean, they all speak to it, that summer meeting up in Los Alamos, how important it is. Ask for what you need. We're behind you. And yet we still only at 5 million. It just, how does that happen? Anyway, I think the other thing that really, as you mentioned, it's a symptom of poverty, and that's another thing that we lack in this state is any sort of comprehensive look at the root causes of hunger. Certainly, it varies across the state, and having a long-term plan to eliminate poverty within the state, which then, of course, would eliminate hunger in the state. And yet while we're making progress on tax policy and we've made some progress in other areas, we also have great challenges in terms of just even access to some of the benefit programs that our citizens should be tapping into, our most vulnerable citizens. And yet those are some very easy fixes. But then we don't want to take the step to let's sit down and look at why do we have this issue in the state, and what can the state do long-term to get rid of it? And whether it could be a many myriad of problems. And there was a bill introduced on universal basic income. That was kind of a specialized bill, but that's Sherry, your study mentioned that if we can eliminate the poverty in the state, then the hunger will go away. If people are paid a living wage, the hunger will go away. It's all interconnected. I know I'm rambling on, but that to me is, I think, something that we need to address is a comprehensive look at poverty in the state, and then where we as a state, policy-wise, going to address it, and start moving forward. And I don't think we can't do it in a 30-day session. So, which is why we also advocate in favor of changing our whole legislative process in this state. So I'm kind of rambling on, and I can talk to you more about some of the other bills we worked on. We, of course, supported all the governor's food initiative, and we've certainly encouraged all of our advocates and congregations to do so. But you two were really the stars, and I certainly want to hear what Emily has to say. Voices is an organization that we turn to constantly for information and for policy support. So you can come back to me again, Pam, but let's hear from some of the other wise folks here.
Representative Ferrary?
Yes, when Kurt, you were mentioning about the frustration of how come, you know, or why things don't translate to what is needed and what we say we're going to support in the different committees, and why from the House bills it goes over to the Senate. I used to think that sometimes the House HB2 would leave a few things out for the Senate to be able to put in and add and feel a part of this, because it does generate mostly from the House. But I'm not sure about that anymore, because, you know, so little does get added on the Senate side. And this is frustrating on all kinds of levels. And I think that we were hoping things would be a little different with change of LFC directors, and also with some of our leadership in the Finance Committee and Appropriations. But we're not sure why this isn't translating to being different. So not only in the process, but also in the kind of like the assertion of us as legislators on what happens for the bills, for House Bill 2 and 3 especially. I think we're going to have to do more and be more assertive to make sure that these this funding gets to where it needs to be, and not just wait for happen chance or for someone else's ideas that aren't elected. And you know, not meaning you as advocates and nonprofits. I'm meaning, you know, people in administration. So yeah, there is that frustration, and you know, certainly among quite a few other legislators who want this system to change and not make it so that we aren't getting the funds to where they need to be, and not having so much in our rainy day is what they used to say. Now they're just saying, oh, our, you know, resources, you know, so that it's just not acceptable. You're absolutely right. I'm trying to think of something else you said that was so important, but I'll leave it to other people to say.
And Representative Ferrari, I'm so grateful that you shared that. I was working, we actually, the food banks were working a lot with some of our senators to make sure that that funding went into HB2 on the Senate side. And their advice to us was we really should have been working on the House side to make sure it got in there, because it's easier for them to protect the funding that's already in there versus adding to it. So that was the feedback we got. And so we'll of course learn from that and make changes for next year. Thank you though, so much.
Sure. In our frustration, it will take us forward, right?
That's right. Well, that, and it helps, right? Thank you both, also all of you, for that dialogue. So the idea of not only having the presenting, but having a conversation around the ins and outs and some of the things that we don't see sometimes as advocates on the inside of the legislative process. And Representative Ferrari is right, with the Legislative Finance Committee, with the food initiative in particular, and we'll circle back around with this because I want to pass this on to Emily. Very interesting conversations, and I'll share a little bit more about that if we've got time in a bit, about kind of to that point, you know, how do we need to have that conversation with staff as well in a way that helps us all get things across the finish line together, right? It doesn't always feel like it fits that way, but it can. I'm an optimist. So Emily, really want to say thanks so much to Emily Wildau, who is with us this evening as well. New Mexico Voices for Children, as we all know, an organization that's been steadfast in helping us all understand what it means to be a state with high poverty. Sherry shared many of those statistics that are real. They're really about human beings. And Voices for Children helps us understand that process over a long period of time, decades now. So Emily, thanks so much for being with us and sharing out your perspective.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Emily Wildau. I'm a senior research and policy analyst and the Kids Count coordinator at New Mexico Voices. So at Voices, we support all of these hunger initiatives that have been touched on and discussed at length so far tonight. And we also really deeply focus on systems change. So we look at what are all of those factors that are driving food insecurity, whether that's poverty or other economic and all variety of other indicators, right, that are influencing and driving the fact that we have people that are hungry. And that also includes the systems in our state. So do we have a budget that has a diverse set of revenue streams that's sustainable, that can fund the programs our families and kids need? And is our tax system fair? Is our tax system bringing in those revenues from the people who can afford it, or are we putting it on the backs of folks who are working really, really hard and not getting to keep enough of that money in their pockets? So, when we come into the legislative session every year, we release the New Mexico Kids Count Data Book, and that provides us with this collection of data indicators related to child well-being. So the categories that we look at are economic well-being, education, health, and family and community. Although we know that the data are a snapshot in time, they lag behind by a couple of years, and they're not the full story of what's happening in our communities. We provide this information to advocates and to lawmakers with a connection specifically to a list of policy priorities that would improve child well-being for our kids and families. I think it's also of note to mention at the start of the legislative session this year, a national report came out that ranked states based on the fairness of their tax system. And for once, New Mexico is at the top of a list. We are ranked as the 9th most progressive tax system in the country, which is really, really incredible. And we were really excited to go into the session and work more building on that success that we've had over the last several years. So when you think specifically about policy initiatives that are related to children, your first thought may not be tax and budget policy. It's always my first thought, but that's what we focus on. Primarily, we lead on that front. And we do that because if our budget isn't big enough and if our tax system is unfair, kids and families lose out on the programs that would make a difference to them. And they end up paying more than their fair share in taxes to support the very programs that their families might need. So that's why we focus so hard on making our tax system more progressive and diversifying our state revenue. So our budget can pay for the things our kids and families need today and in the future. We also support initiatives for family economic security, like guaranteed income and paid family medical leave, education policies all the way from birth through higher education and workforce training, health policies that range from fully funding Medicaid to the food initiative work to public health and safety issues. And all of these policies that we focus on really center children and their families. That sometimes translates into support for seniors, many of whom we know are raising their grandchildren. And all of our work also is done with a lens on gender and racial equity. So I do want to quickly run through some of the highlights from the session. I should be able to do it fast, but it's a lot of stuff. So if you end up having questions, I can share it with you later. All of the legislation I'm going to update you on, either directly or indirectly, supports food security for our kids and communities, depending on whether it's specific food initiative or those kind of driving force policies. So Pam mentioned right at the top that we saw an increase in our state budget, which is really great. But the bill that I'm most excited about is House Bill 252, which was our tax package. And that passed and included a whole variety of things. One of those was an increase in the corporate income tax rate for many corporations that have foreign and multinational roots. And so they've been able to take advantage of loopholes that shift their profits abroad, and then they avoid paying New Mexico's corporate income tax. The tax package also significantly limited the capital gains deduction. So that overwhelmingly benefits the wealthiest among us by allowing investors to deduct the profits they make on sale of stock and bonds. Both of these revenue-raising pieces of the tax package mean the state will now generate revenue that we've been losing out on that can go to support programs and services that matter to our communities. We also saw some climate protecting tax credits enacted, and there were some tax cuts in our personal income tax structure. So that will mean that all New Mexicans are going to see some level of a tax cut, but the cuts are primarily targeted to benefit low and middle income families. So that's going to let them keep a larger share of their income to support their basic needs. We also saw increased funding for the early childhood education and care department, and that's a place where you get a huge return on investments. But one of the things we're really excited about is a pilot wage and career ladder. So that's going to begin to address the really low wages that our child care workers make, which then in turn helps their families to be able to support themselves, to afford the food that they need at home. House Bill 303 created a pilot program to provide guaranteed income to adults who are receiving TANF benefits and who are enrolled in specific workforce training programs, and that's regardless of immigration status. When it comes to higher ed, investing in higher education is something that has a big return on our economy, both by training the workforce, lowering crime, lowering, health risks. There's all sorts of benefits that come from that. So we saw full funding of the Opportunity Scholarship. A higher education trust fund was created. So that's going to ensure the state can continue to support scholarship programs like the Opportunity and Lottery Scholarship that make college tuition free in New Mexico. That makes us a leader nationwide. And by supporting tuition-free higher education, we're eliminating one expense our college students face that can help improve their ability to cover their basic needs, like purchasing food. The increase in K-12 funding happened again, and that included salary increases for our educators and all of our school staff, investments in reading instruction, educator clinical practice, special education stipends. They also, in House Bill 171, updated the graduation requirements. So there's a lot more flexibility in making high school relevant to our students. So they're getting opportunities for work-based learning, career technical education, things like that, that are really going to help them when they graduate high school be prepared either for college or a career where they'll have the skills they need to succeed and support themselves and their future families. And of course, we saw universal school meals receive full funding. Medicaid was also fully funded, and the budget included $3 million to support county and tribal health councils, which are lifelines for many communities as they really work to prevent and address health challenges like homelessness, food insecurity, diabetes, and opiate use disorders at the local level. And then we had several SNAP changes that were supported in the budget, an increase in SNAP eligibility to 200% of the federal poverty level, and an increase in SNAP for seniors and those with disabilities from $25 per month to $100 per month. Those were really huge wins in the SNAP world. Unfortunately, there was a pilot for kinship care SNAP, which would have directly helped grandparents raising grandchildren, that did not get included. And then for voices, I think our biggest loss this session was seeing the bill for paid family and medical leave, which would have meant no one has to choose between keeping a job or taking care of a sick family member or bonding with their new baby. That bill almost made it to the governor's desk and lost by only 2 votes in the House after passing the Senate. So we're excited to bring that back and try again next year. But altogether, these things are designed to help improve the system, provide the supports that families need, and improve the tax structure so that they're getting to keep more of their hard-earned wages in their pockets to spend on their basic needs. So I know that was rapid fire, but I really feel like it's important to talk about all of the big wins we did have, kind of in the broader support system that's available to our kids and our families.
Emily, thanks so much for giving us that bigger picture, the broader pictures you said, and also sharing how these programs are connected. you know, and they're coordinated, and that there's a big difference between things that are they're one time only or out there on a limb. The more they're coordinated, and thanks again to Emily and her team at New Mexico Voices for Children, and for all of you who are a part of that advocacy work, because it is taking us all to actually get these things across the finish line. A couple of things, Emily, that you mentioned that are really important. So I mentioned big part of our state budget that helps us with House Bill 2 and 3 is that oil and gas revenue. You talked about diversifying that that revenue and how important it is to get these tax structures changed to do so. So big kudos to you and your team and all of those who've been working on those structures to advance that diversity of our budget, which is going to help us when I talked about the ebb and flow, right? When we don't see the revenues from that larger pool of funding from oil and gas, right? The other thing that you talked about, really that idea of a holistic approach to child and family well-being. That's where you can hear all these programs really are interconnected, and it's really about tying them even more tightly together over time. A couple of things I want to ask, and Representative Ferrary, and I know we might want to take a few questions as well if folks have them. I wanted to ask too, Emily, you mentioned the SNAP expansion, or SNAP for the SNAP supplement for seniors and individuals with disabilities, a $14.8 million investment, right, in our state, taking folks from $25 a month to $100 a month for SNAP, those who are eligible. That was in what we call Section 4. And I want to ask Representative Ferrari, in every year, right, some things end up integrated into base budgets. Some end up in these Section 4 and 5 as supplementals. Can you tell us a little bit more about, can we hold on to that $14.8 million each year, or are we going to be back continuing to advocate for it? We will anyway, but you know, just as an example of why we need to keep at this, right?
Sure. You know, Emily might know more about that. I don't have my notes with me, but whenever we add or amend, I'm not really sure if that goes in as recurring or not. I guess it would depend, but I would hope that it would be recurring and get into the more permanent part of the budget instead of having to be kind of as a section. I'm not really that well versed about it. I've never been on appropriations, and maybe I should have been. But anyway.
Well, apologies for putting you on the spot. I didn't mean to by any means. It's really about these various pockets of funding, right? That are pooled to create a budget every year. And Sherry mentioned it before too, right? That $5 million for food banks, we have to go back each year. We have to go back each year for many of these programs. Emily, can you share a little bit more on that one too?
Yes, I'm not sure I know much more than Representative Ferrari, but what I do know is that even when our funds are recurring, if the state gets in a situation where oil and gas busts, that still isn't necessarily guaranteed. There's still a lot of shifting that can happen. And I would be remiss if I didn't also share that the legislature has been setting up a lot of these various funds to take that extra oil and gas money to try to cushion that blow when it eventually busts. We've seen our legislatures really set up a lot of different types of funds that I think are going to make that less painful than it has been in the past. So I do really want to give credit where credit is due there, even though there's obviously still a little bit of a heavy reliance on oil and gas. So that's what I'll share about that.
Yeah, that's really good point. Setting up the legacy fund and the other trusts. We even changed the tobacco settlement fund to being where it's in its own and can't be robbed like it was when we were in a pinch quite a few years ago. They took 69 million and still have another, well, they have still another 69 million to restore it to the full thing. I think they took 114, but anyway, who's counting? We are. So that's a really good point, that we're trying to decrease that volatility and making sure that we have those funds.
Thank you, Representative Ferrari. And Emily, thanks. I see Kurt has his hand up, and then we want to also, if anybody else has questions for us.
Just very quickly, I think the other very noticeable thing the last few years that I've been doing this is the fact that, again, oil and gas, as you mentioned, 40% of our revenue towards our budget, and that hasn't changed. And we're not making any progress towards economic transition off of our dependency on oil and gas revenue, which we know will eventually, in fact, they're already seeing it dropping on the horizon. We're not making any progress towards that at the state level. And that's a very frustrating and worrisome thing to me. It's great that we're setting up all these funds to help cushion what could be coming down the road and what will be coming down the road, but that's not enough.
Well, we are shifting, if you don't mind me interrupting, that to try and replace that by having different kinds of taxes, or for on electricity, being solar, which we want to still encourage, solar production or wind production, but then on the energy that is produced by clean energy, we need to start taxing that to, like you said, replace that, or to get more economic development and corporations coming in and pay their fair share. We did try to make it so that we were getting more funds from the severance tax, because Texas charges 25 cents. We wanted to make it so that New Mexico wasn't giving them such a great deal at 20 cents forever. And we didn't get that through, but I think we'll try again this next session and have a better discussion on, why, and our state land commissioner told the state she was not going to have any more permits for oil and gas extraction until we raise that to 25 cents. So we'll see how that goes. Is it cents or dollars? I'm sorry, I'm on vacation.
Isn't it a percent?
Percent, yep. Yes. Yep. I knew cent wasn't right.
Or something.
So yeah.
Emily?
But yeah, it's going up. We need to be equal to Texas. That's what?
I'm trying to check the notes of one of my colleagues who covers this stuff, because I don't know off the top of my head.
As we can see, I want to say it's complicated to make sausage, as was stated before, to work on the bill, and that and really want to thank everybody who's also working on it here in the space and beyond as well, and your colleagues. Other questions? Any other questions? Sherry, I think you might have had your hand up, or we're going to say something. No? Okay. Other questions for our group? Anything anybody wants to or share out? Yes, Melanie.
I just have a request. If there's any organization or church organization that would be interested in donating gift cards, like Smith's gift cards that could be used for gas, for us to be able to give to families, that would be tremendously appreciated. That's something that's in the past, we've been able to give to people who are in, like real crisis situations, particularly the Smith's cards, because they can be used for gasoline and also food and things. And as you know, a lot of times there's families who can't necessarily get things at pantries because they have food issues, allergies and things. So that's a really good way to help people who can't use some of the things that are available at pantries. So I am just sending it out into the universe that I'm looking, and I don't know if Andy, he's my my downtown community school collaborative coordinator, if he's also needing some, but we gave out our very last ones last week. And since the COVID money has dried up and the rents have gone up, the families that are the most needy, it's just really a struggle to help them right now.
Melanie, what organization are you with?
I'm a community school coordinator
Okay,
at
yeah.
Wallace Elementary School in downtown Albuquerque.
Thank you.
And I happen to work up the hill at Longfellow Elementary at Martin Luther King and Edith.
I think you both are helping us understand that a more holistic approach, right? That when we talk about hunger, we talk about poverty, right? And we talk about hunger, that it's also about making sure that people have not only shelter, but homes, that they have that roof and home security, as well as food security, and that all of these things are interconnected, right? Thank you, Melanie and Andy, for sharing your story and the need that you're seeing that's right in front of you all the time. Any other things that people want to share? Any questions for our presenters? I know Representative Ferrary had to jump. I'm going to send her a quick text to say thank you, thank you, thank you. She is such a champion. Yeah, Jason. Yes, please.
I just want to take a second and thank Carlos for doing a lot of the footwork here to get this going. Yeah, appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Jason. Right. And I think people are going to hop off. Carlos, final things that you'd like to share. And yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Carlos, for bringing us all together this evening and for the work of the Interfaith Hunger Coalition.
I think Judy has a question. Before I say my piece, I'll pass it on to Judy.
Yeah, this is a bit of a different topic than we've discussed tonight, but it's on the dignity, not detention bill not passing. And one of the things is, you know, it would close down several facilities around the state. And I know at an earlier time, one of the concerns was, well, what happens to the people who are working there? And I wondered if, I know the bill didn't pass, they're going to try it again, but has that aspect been addressed? Because that is a real factor for families whose members work in these places.
You know, Judy, that's a good question, Judy. And I know that Sophia Genovese at the Immigrant Law Center, they've done a number of things along those lines. I wish I could give you specifics, but I'll look that up and get it to you. But they have found that there are alternatives, and the communities would rather not have those facilities in their communities. So, but I'll get that to you, Judy.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Well,
And also,
I guess, oh, go ahead, Pam.
well, just a couple of things I was going to say. That might be a good subject. So every second Thursday of the month, we have our Food, Farm, and Hunger Initiative, kind of a roundtable conversation, right? So please feel welcome to come and join us. You can contact any of us for the information for the Zoom links for that. And that is every second Thursday from noon to 1:30 or noon to 1:30, depending on how long we go. And again, our New Mexico Food and Ag Policy Council will be meeting, and I put that in the chat for the RSVP on that, will be the 28th of this month, noon to 2:30. Everybody welcome to all of those roundtable conversations and presentations. And I'll pass it back to Carlos. Thanks.
First of all, I want to thank Pam for doing such a masterful job in moderating this program. Thank you, Pam. I also want to mention a couple of things. I was looking through the list of people who joined us, and so folks from Taos, from Gallup, from Las Cruces, and of course Santa Fe, Albuquerque. So this is really truly a statewide effort, statewide interest in this issue. And finally, I do want to mention something that we're working on that we haven't totally defined, and it deals with the topic that Sherry brought up. And so sorry, Sherry, we haven't brought you into this, but it's a discussion that Jason Riggs and Kayla and Judy Messel and I have talked about, trying to look on how the the sourcing problem is affecting different areas of feeding operations in the food banks, but also the community food pantries like Rio Grande Food Project and others. And we really haven't defined how we're going to look at this. We thought about doing a program in April or May, but we can put it back towards later months. We just want to make sure that we have this discussion. So Sherry, I'll be connecting with you, and we'll be connecting with Katie Anderson, and of course Jason's in on this conversation. So if you have any thoughts, we want to make our dilemma right now is we want to give a statewide picture, but we also, if we do an in-person thing, it'd have to be the operations that work in Albuquerque. So we might do both, but at this point, it's just in the thinking process. So again, I think we're going to close here, and I want to thank all of you. And if you didn't get to, if you weren't on our email and want to see the recording, we'll just let us know. We'll send out the recording. So goodbye, everyone.
Thanks, Carlos.